Hello, friends, and welcome to the new episode. In this episode, we'll be listening to the story of Lincoln and the alien commander Camila. Sit back and enjoy the story. Happy viewing. The message came the way bad news always did on Kesh 9. Too early, too quiet, and delivered by someone who wouldn't meet Lincoln's eyes. "Commander wants you," the runner said, and then fled before Lincoln could ask the obvious follow-up, which was *Y, followed closely by "What did I break?" and finally, "Is it too late to defect to the mess tent?" He crossed the camp in the bruised half-dark, boots sucking at mud that had, until quite recently, been part of the frontier's charming ecosystem, and was now mostly regret. All around him, the army of the Third Coalition slept the thin, twitchy sleep of people who'd done the math on tomorrow and hadn't liked the total. Nobody got summoned to Commander Camila's tent for tea. Lincoln knew this. He spent the walk composing his own eulogy and workshopping the phrase he died as he lived, confused. The tent flap parted and there she was. He'd seen her from a distance, everyone had. But close, in the low blue light of a single field lamp, Camila was something the reports hadn't prepared him for. Her skin held a cool luminescence, like moonlight decided to take up a career in intimidation. Her ears tapered to fine points, elf graceful, the only thing about her that suggested the vast gulf of stars between his species and hers. And her eyes, fierce, gold, and currently aimed at him like twin targeting arrays. "You are the aide," she said. It was not a question, so Lincoln bravely answered a question no one had asked. "I am *and aide, very much a background character. When they cast this war, I was man 4. His mouth, as ever, had opted out of the chain of command. "I assumed help the commander meant coffee. I make an excellent coffee, deeply mediocre at everything else, but the coffee is a religious experience." A muscle at the corner of her mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. It might have been the prelude to having him launched from a catapult. He genuinely could not tell, and that uncertainty would define the rest of his short, remarkable life. "I require assistance," she said, "with my armor." He looked. Laid across the cot was a suit of ancient plate, blue-black and heavy, every surface etched with marks he didn't need translated. 100 victories, scored into metal like tally lines on a prison wall. "Where's your squire, your attendant, your terrifying honor guard?" "I have dressed for war alone for 200 years. She said it plainly, the way you'd mention the weather. "Tonight I do not wish to." And that asterisk was the first crack in the legend, and Lincoln was too busy being nervous to notice he'd just been handed something no one else alive had ever held. So he began. The straps first, his fingers clumsy against clasps built for a body that ran a few degrees cooler than his. He talked the whole time, because silence felt like standing at the edge of something high. He complained about the mud. He proposed, formally, that they reschedule the battle for a Tuesday. He told her the plate was heavier than his student debt, which required a lengthy and unwelcome explanation of student debt, during which she stared at him as though he'd described a beautiful and elaborate stupidity, which, to be fair, he had. Piece by piece it came together. Shoulder guards, forearm plates, the great etched breastplate lowered over her heart. The ritual slowed them both. The camp outside went quiet enough to hear the lamp hiss. 2 people, 1 act of impossible trust in the last still hour before everything got loud. He reached for the final clasp, the one over her heart, and fastened it. Then Camila took his hands. She did it fast, both of hers closing over both of his, and pressed them flat against the cold steel above her heart. The great commander went utterly, terribly still, and in her fierce gold eyes Lincoln saw the one thing all that armor had been forged to hide. Not fear of dying, she'd made her peace with dying a century ago, but fear of dying having never once let a single soul this close. "They see the victories," she said, very quietly. "No one sees the person wearing them. 100 years, aide. 100 years and not one warm hand at the hour before dawn." Her jaw tightened around the wit that was her real armor. And of all the fools the stars could send me, it is the one who cannot stop making jokes. For once, Lincoln didn't reach for a punchline. He just held on, her cold steel under his palms and her hands over his, and understood with sudden, ridiculous clarity that surviving the coming battle had quietly become the most important thing that had ever happened to him. "Then don't die," he said, hoarse. "That's my whole strategy. I've thought about it a lot in the last 30 seconds. The horn sounded. Dawn bled red across the tent flap. And on the far side of the storm, bruised, impossible, alive. Her hand found his in the smoke, and neither of them needed a single joke to explain why she didn't let go. The problem with surviving, Lincoln decided, was that nobody ever prepared you for the part that came after. There were speeches about dying. There were medals, banners, entire tragic ballads reserved for people who had the good manners to fall heroically. But no one had written so much as a pamphlet titled "Asterisk So You Lived. Now what?" Which felt like a serious oversight, and he intended to file a complaint with someone as soon as he located anyone in charge who wasn't currently unconscious. The battle was 3 hours over. The frontier smoked in the flat gold light of full morning, and the medical tents overflowed with the noisily alive. Lincoln sat on an overturned supply crate with a gash on his forehead he kept forgetting about until it reminded him, and watched Commander Camila walk the field the way she did everything, like the ground itself owed her an apology. She found him, of course she found him. 200 years of hunting things across 100 worlds. One lightly concussed aide on an open plain was not going to tax her. "You are bleeding," she observed. "Character growth," Lincoln said. "This morning I had 0 war wounds. Now I have 1. At this rate I'll be a grizzled veteran by lunch." She crouched in front of him, and to his enormous surprise pressed a cool strip of medgel to his forehead, with a gentleness her reputation would have violently denied. The blue glow of her skin was fainter in daylight, softened, less like a weapon and more like a person who happened to be lit from within. Her ears, he noticed, now that fear wasn't drowning out everything else, caught the light at their fine points. He decided not to comment on them. He commented on them. "Anyone ever tell you the ears are a strong look? Very ancient forest royalty. Very do not park your spaceship on my lawn." 200 years, she said dryly, and no one has ever put it that way. I cannot imagine why. There it was again, that flicker at the corner of her mouth. He was starting to collect them. He wondered if she knew he was keeping count. Then the moment folded, the way good moments always did around him, because a courier arrived at a dead sprint with a data slate and the specific panic of someone who'd been told to hurry. High Command wanted the commander. There was to be a ceremony, medals, speakers, the whole apparatus of an army that had, against every projection, won and now urgently needed to be seen winning. Camilla's face closed like a visor. And Lincoln, watching her stand, watching the legend snap back over the person like plate over skin, understood the second thing nobody had prepared him for. Last night, in the dark, she had let him see beneath the armor. In the daylight, in front of the machine that had built her, she couldn't. Would they let the great Camila be a woman who held hands at 4 in the morning? Would they let her be tired? 100 victories didn't buy her that. He'd learned last night that they bought her nothing at all. "Go," he said, gentler than he meant to. "Be terrifying. I'll be here. Somebody's got to lower the bar so you look good by comparison." She paused. Something crossed her fierce gold eyes. The thing from the tent. The fear that had no name in any language he spoke. Then, in front of the courier, in front of the smoking field, in front of 200 years of never letting anyone this close, she reached down and took his hand. Held it long enough to be seen. "I am old, Aide," she said quietly. "Older than your grandmother's grandmother. I will watch you grow gray if we are lucky, and I will keep the shape I have worn for centuries. That is the truth beneath asterisk my asterisk armor. It is not a small thing to offer someone a walk they must finish alone." Lincoln looked up at her. This impossible, ancient, luminous woman who had won every battle but this one, and found, for once, that the joke and the truth were the same thing. "Good," he said. "I've always wanted to be the reckless one in the relationship. You've clearly got the wise and immortal angle covered, so somebody has to be the guy who trips over his own feet and orders the wrong thing off the menu. Division of labor, it's called teamwork." For a moment the whole apparatus of the war, the courier, the ceremony, the smoking frontier, the 200 years simply waited. Then Camila laughed. Not a twitch, not a flicker. An actual laugh, low and startled and warm. The sound of something that hadn't been let out in a very long time, and it did more damage to Lincoln's composure than the entire battle had. "Come then," she said, still holding his hand, turning them both toward the tents and the medals and the whole loud, ridiculous business of being alive. "Let us go and lower the bar together." And they did. The dress uniform did not fit Lincoln. This was not a metaphor, though it easily could have been. It was simply too tight across the shoulders and too loose everywhere it mattered, and he'd spent the morning of the victory ceremony discovering muscles he could clench to keep his trousers from staging a defection. He looked, by his own honest assessment, like a scarecrow that had been given a field commission and immediate regrets. The ceremony was held on the reclaimed plateau, under a sky finally the right color, with the whole surviving army arranged in gleaming rows. Banners, music that took itself extremely seriously, and at the center of it all, on a raised platform, stood Commander Camila in ceremonial plate polished to a mirror shine, blue skin luminous, ears catching the light like a crown she hadn't asked for, every inch the monument, every inch the legend. And to exactly one person in that entire assembly, visibly, quietly exhausted. Lincoln stood in the back with the other background characters and watched them do to her what they always did. General Theodore, a cold, tidy man who had won his rank in briefing rooms and had the complexion of someone allergic to weather, read a citation praising her 101st victory in language so grand it circled all the way back around to meaningless. He pinned a medal to a breastplate already so crowded with them that Lincoln suspected they were mostly holding each other up. He called her the blade of the coalition, the unbroken, the shield of 9 worlds. He did not call her tired. He did not call her a person who had held someone's hand at 4 in the morning, because a century of victory buys you nothing warm. That part, apparently, wasn't in the citation. Afterward, in the shadow of the command tent, Theodore delivered the actual news, the kind that never made it to the podium. Lincoln, loitering nearby on the entirely legitimate business of pretending to adjust a tent line, heard enough. Camila was being recalled, not redeployed, elevated. Her own people, the ones who lived among the stars and measured lives in centuries, wanted their greatest weapon home, seated on a high council, safely enshrined where she could be admired and never again risked. A promotion shaped exactly like a cage. Ships were coming within the week. "You have earned rest, Commander," Theodore said, in the tone of a man reading a maintenance schedule. "The council does not extend such honors twice." "No," Camila agreed, "it does not." And that was all. She didn't argue. She didn't so much as change her expression. 200 years had taught her precisely how to receive a sentence dressed as a gift, and Lincoln, watching from the shadows, felt his stupid, mortal heart drop straight through the plateau. She found him after, the way she always found him, and they walked out past the banners to where the frontier went quiet and enormous and indifferent. For a long time neither of them said anything, which for Lincoln was a personal record and a physical ordeal. "You heard," she said finally, not a question. "I heard some. I was doing important tent-line diplomacy, but the tent lied to me and let sound through." He kicked a stone. "Congratulations on the council thing. I hear the chairs are very comfortable, and the view is a slow, screaming eternity of being a statue." "I have refused it before," she said, and this stopped him. "Twice. Each time there was a reason to stay, a war. A world that needed the shield." Her gold eyes were fixed on the horizon, not on him. "Both times the reason was a war, never a person. My people do not consider a mortal a reason. A mortal is a season. You wait for it to pass. The wind moved over the plateau. Lincoln, who had made a career of filling silence, found the silence had finally won. I have buried this feeling before, aide, Camila went on, very quietly, the wit gone thin. Each time I tell myself the same thing, that it is not fair to the mortal, that I will only stand at a grave and go on standing for another 100 years. It is a kindness to refuse it. I am extremely good at refusing it. I have 2 centuries of practice. She turned to look at him at last, and there it was again, naked and terrible, the fear the armor was built for. And then you made a joke about my ears, and I laughed, and I discovered I am not good at all. Lincoln swallowed hard. His trousers chose that exact, sacred moment to slip, and he caught them with one hand, and somehow the sheer indignity of being a mortal disaster in a borrowed uniform in front of an immortal legend, was the thing that broke him open. Then let me be a bad idea, he said. You've spent 200 years being wise. Let me be the reckless one. That's still the division of labor. You bury the feeling, and I'll be down here at the bottom of the hole, holding your hand, making terrible jokes until the season passes. He tightened his grip on his ridiculous trousers, and his voice, when it came, was steady. A week, Camila. Refuse it a 3rd time or take me with you and let the council choke on a mortal at their table. Either way. Just not the statue. I've seen you laugh. I'm not letting them unteach you that. And for the first time in 200 years, Commander Camila, the unbroken, the blade, the shield of 9 worlds, did not have an answer ready. The ships came 4 days early, which Lincoln took as a personal insult. He'd been counting on the week. He'd made plans with the week. The week, and he had an asterisk understanding asterisk, and now 3 sleek silver vessels were sitting on the plateau like enormous, judgmental teardrops, and the understanding was off. They'd sent an escort. Of course they had. You didn't retrieve a 200-year-old living weapon with a polite letter. You sent envoys, and the envoys were 3 of Camila's own people. Tall, luminous, ears finer than hers, faces arranged in expressions of patient, geological calm. They looked at the mud. They looked at the human camp. They looked at Lincoln in particular, the way one looks at a stain on an otherwise acceptable tablecloth. The lead envoy was named Elena, and she had the specific serenity of someone who had never once in her long life been late, wrong, or contradicted. She addressed Camila in their own liquid language, and Camila answered in the flat, closed tone Lincoln had come to hate. The visor voice, the legend voice, the sound of a person folding herself back into her armor. He couldn't follow the words. He didn't need to. He'd been the subject of enough conversations conducted just above his head to recognize the shape of one. He caught his own name once. Lincoln. It landed in the middle of their smooth alien vowels like a dropped wrench. Elena's gaze flicked to him, then away, dismissing him back into the category of asterisk weather asterisk. That was, in hindsight, the moment Lincoln decided to do something profoundly stupid. He waited until the envoys retired to their teardrop ships for the night. He waited until the camp went dark and Camila stood alone at the plateau's edge. And then he walked up beside her with his hands jammed in his pockets and his heart doing something arrhythmic and idiotic. So, he said, I've been thinking, which, I'll grant you, is not historically my strong suit. This alarms me more than the battle did, Camila said, but she didn't look away from the stars. Your friend Elena. She talks about me like I'm a spill, and the thing is, she's not wrong. From up there, from 200 years, I am asterisk a spill. I'm here and gone in a blink, a season. He pulled his hands from his pockets. But here's the flaw in the immortal math. You keep saying immortal isn't a reason because immortal doesn't last, and I've decided that's backwards. A thing doesn't matter less because it ends. It matters more. Nobody writes ballads about the sun because the sun's always there. They write them about the one sunrise they happen to be awake for. Camila was very still. That was almost profound, she said quietly. I am concerned for you. I peeked. It's downhill from here, I promise. He took a breath. I'm not asking you to refuse the council to save the frontier or the coalition or the 9 worlds. You've done all that. You've done asterisk enough of that for 9 lifetimes, which for you is apparently a Tuesday. I'm asking you to refuse it for the single dumbest reason your people have. A mortal, me. Specifically the guy who can't keep his trousers up and thinks your ears are a strong look. Do the one thing 200 years of wisdom told you not to. He spread his hands. Be reckless, just once. I'll cover for you. I'm an expert. For a long moment the wind was the only thing that spoke. Then Camila turned to him, and in the starlight her fierce gold eyes were doing something he'd never seen them do. They were asterisk deciding, right there, in real time, 2 centuries of certainty coming loose at the seams. You do not understand what you ask, she said. If I refuse a 3rd time for this asterisk reason, they will not simply be disappointed. To my people, choosing a season over eternity is not brave. It is a kind of madness, a defect. They will look at me the way Elena looks at the mud. Her voice dropped. I have been the shield of 9 worlds. I have never once been a fool. You are asking me to become one, publicly forever, in front of everyone who has ever admired me. Yeah, Lincoln admitted. When you say it like that it does sound bad. It sounds, Camila said, like the first thing in 200 years I have wanted with my whole self. And then she laughed, that same low, startled, unarmored laugh, and pressed her forehead briefly to his, cool skin against his stupid mortal warmth. You are a catastrophe, Aide. A slow, ridiculous, mortal catastrophe, and I have decided I would rather have one blink of you than another century of being admired by people who do not know my name is funny in your mouth. Lincoln's heart tried to leave through his throat. Is that a yes? It is a maybe asterisk that is deeply afraid, she said. Tomorrow I will tell Elena. Tomorrow I will become the greatest fool the 9 worlds have ever produced. She drew back, and the fear was still there, but now something reckless burned right beside it. You had better be worth it. I won't be, Lincoln said honestly, but I'll be asterisk hilarious about it. And in the dark, at the edge of the frontier, the untouchable commander held the hand of her catastrophe, and, for the first time in 2 centuries, chose the sunrise. Telling Elena did not go the way Lincoln had pictured, mostly because Lincoln had pictured shouting, and there was no shouting. There was something far worse. There was asterisk disappointment asterisk, delivered at a temperature just above absolute zero, in a voice so calm it made the silence afterward feel loud. They stood in the largest of the teardrop ships at dawn, Camila in her ceremonial plate, Lincoln in a uniform that finally, tragically, fit, and Elena flanked by the other 2 envoys like a verdict flanked by its footnotes. Camila spoke first in their liquid tongue, and Lincoln watched Elena's serene face for a crack and found none. When Camila finished, Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then, deliberately, she switched to Lincoln's language. She wanted him to understand. That he'd learn was the cruelty of it. You would trade the council, Elena said to Camila, the honor of 9 worlds, 2 centuries of standing for asterisk this. She did not gesture at Lincoln. She simply looked at him once completely and let the looking do the work. It will die, Camila, not in battle, worse, slowly. You will watch its hair thin and its hands shake and its mind go soft, and you will hold what is left, and then you will hold nothing, and you will still have 400 years to stand at the edge of that nothing. We do not forbid this out of coldness. We forbid it because we have asterisk watched asterisk it. We have buried our fools. There is a reason there are so few of us who ever loved a season twice. And there it was, the thing beneath Elena's asterisk armor. Not contempt, grief old and scarred over. She had loved a mortal once. Lincoln understood it in a single breath, and it took all the fight out of his anger and left only something quieter and sadder. Camila had gone very still. This was the argument she had made to herself for 200 years, spoken aloud at last by someone who meant it kindly. Lincoln could see it working on her, could see the old certainty reaching up to reclaim her, the wisdom, the sensible, immortal math that ended every time in a grave. So he did the only thing he was truly good at. He opened his mouth. "She's right," he said. Camilla's head turned sharply. Alina's eyebrow rose a precise, victorious millimeter. "No, she is. Hold on, let me finish before everyone in this beautiful teardrop starts celebrating." Lincoln's hands were shaking, so he clasped them behind his back like he'd seen the generals do, and it helped exactly not at all. "Alina's completely right. I'm going to die, probably embarrassingly. Statistically, I'll trip on something, and you'll have 400 years on the other side of it, and some of those years are going to be asterisk terrible, and I can't fix that, and I'd be a liar and a worse fool than you already think I am if I stood here and told you it won't hurt." He looked at Camila, only at Camila. But here's what she left out, because she's making the immortal argument and she's forgotten the mortal one. "Down here where I live, asterisk everything ends. Every single thing. Every friend, every summer, every good meal, every person I've ever loved, all of it on a clock always. That's not the tragedy of my life, Camila. That's the whole engine of it. It's why any of it means anything at all. You've spent 200 years thinking mortality is the thing that makes love not worth it." He swallowed. "I've spent 31 years knowing it's the only thing that makes love worth asterisk anything." The ship was silent. Outside, the frontier warmed toward full morning. "Alina buried someone," Lincoln went on, gentler now, turning to her. "I'm sorry, I mean that, but you didn't lose because you loved a season. You lost because that's the asterisk deal asterisk. Everybody down here takes it. Every one of us signs up knowing exactly how it ends, and we do it anyway, because the alternative is standing at the edge forever, and never once being asterisk warm asterisk." He turned back to Camila, and his voice cracked straight down the middle. "You told me 100 victories don't buy you one warm hand at 4 in the morning. So don't buy a council seat with the last of your nerve. Buy the hand. Buy the blink. Buy the one sunrise you're awake for. Be the fool. I'll be a fool right beside you, and I'll make it asterisk funny asterisk, I swear to you. I'll make the whole slow, terrible thing so funny you'll forget to be afraid of it half the time." "Stop," Camila said. He stopped. She crossed the space between them. She took his shaking hands in hers, the way she had in the tent a lifetime and 4 days ago, and pressed them flat against the cold plate over her heart, and this time she was not afraid to be seen doing it. "Alina," Camila said, without looking away from Lincoln, "you may tell the council I decline. A third time, and you may tell them why." Her mouth curved, the twitch, the flicker, and then the full, reckless, startled thing. "Tell them the Shield of 9 Worlds has finally, after 200 years, done something asterisk stupid asterisk." Alina looked at the two of them for a long moment. And whatever old buried grief lived behind her serene face shifted, just slightly, into something that was almost envy. "I will tell them," she said quietly, "that you were braver than I was." And then, to everyone's astonishment, least of all Lincoln's, she inclined her head to him. The teardrop ships left at noon, 3 silver tears rising into a sky that had finally, permanently, decided to be blue. Alina went with them. She did not look back, which Lincoln respected, because looking back was for people who hadn't made peace with a thing, and Alina, whatever else she was, had spent 2 centuries making peace with things. But just before she boarded, she pressed something small and cool into Camilla's hand, a token, worn smooth by long handling, and murmured a few words in their liquid tongue. Lincoln didn't ask for a translation. Some things weren't his to have. He only noticed that Camila closed her fingers around it very tightly, and that for the rest of the day she kept touching her pocket to check it was still there, the way you check for a thing you cannot afford to lose. They gave him a hard time about it afterward. The whole camp did. Word travels fast in an army with nothing left to do but survive, and the aide who talked the Shield of 9 Worlds out of immortality was, frankly, the best story anyone had had in years. General Theodore was appalled in his tidy, bloodless way, and made several pointed remarks about protocol. The mess tent started a betting pool on how long it would last. Somebody drew a very unflattering cartoon of Lincoln holding his trousers up with one hand and the fabric of the space-time continuum with the other. And Lincoln liked it so much he asked for a copy. He found he didn't mind being the fool. He'd been auditioning for the part his whole life. It was nice, at last, to be cast. The war wound down the way wars do, not with a grand finish but with a long, grinding exhale, treaties signed by tired men in distant rooms, the frontier handed back to its confused ecosystem. The Third Coalition demobilized. And on the last morning, as the camp came apart around them into crates and farewells and mud that would finally get to be a field again, Lincoln stood at the plateau's edge with Camila and confronted the terrifying, unfamiliar problem of a future. "So," he said, "this is the part where I admit I have no plan. I had a plan for the battle which was don't, and it worked. I had a plan for you which was be reckless at her until she agrees, and against all sense that also worked. But I've now used up my entire lifetime allocation of plans, and I'm looking at, statistically, another 50 years. 50, Camila said, if you stop tripping over things. So 30, realistically." She laughed, easily now, the sound no longer startled out of her but simply hers, kept somewhere close and reachable. She'd changed out of the ceremonial plate weeks ago. She wore plain clothes, mortal clothes, and her blue skin caught the morning and her fine-pointed ears caught the light. And she looked, Lincoln thought, less like a monument and more like a person who'd finally been allowed to climb down off the pedestal and feel the grass. "I have a plan," she said. "Of course you do. You've had 200 years to make one. That's deeply unfair and I object." "My plan," Camila said, "is this. I am very old and you are very brief, and somewhere in the middle of those two impossible facts is a small, ordinary life. A house, perhaps, somewhere the sky stays one color. Terrible jokes at breakfast. You, tripping over the same doorstep every morning until I move it purely to confuse you." She turned to him, and the fear that had lived behind her eyes since the tent was not gone. It would never entirely be gone, he understood. It was the price of loving a season, but it had made its peace with the thing standing beside it. "And when it ends, aide, because it will end, I have never once lied to you and I will not start. I will have 400 years to carry it. And I have decided I would rather carry the memory of you than the emptiness I was so carefully keeping myself for." She took his hands. "Elena told me at the end that grief is only love with nowhere left to go. I spent 2 centuries afraid of the grief. I forgot to want the love first." Lincoln discovered his eyes were doing something inconvenient and undignified. "That's not fair," he managed. "You can't out-profound me on the last morning. That's my department. We had a division of labor." "You may write the eulogy," Camila offered with enormous generosity. "You have been rehearsing it since the day we met." "I have. He laughed, wet and helpless. "God, I've got a great one. It opens with a joke about the trousers." "Naturally." And so they stood there, the fearsome commander and the foolish aide, at the edge of a frontier that had finally stopped bleeding, under a sky that had decided to stay. 200 years and 30 years, an immortal and a season, a woman lit from within, and the disaster who'd made her laugh in a tent before a battle no one expected to survive. She had 100 victories etched into armor she would never wear again. He had one gash on his forehead that had already healed to a thin white line. Neither of those was the thing that had mattered. The thing that mattered was small and warm and did not require a single joke to explain. Camila lifted his hands, the way she had in the dark before the storm, and pressed them flat over her heart. No cold steel between them now, just the quiet, ordinary, extraordinary warmth of 2 people who had each, against all the wisdom of their very different worlds, chosen the sunrise. "Come, catastrophe," she said softly. "Let us go and be foolish for as long as we are given." And they did. We've reached the end of another adventure, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to hit the like button, Leave your thoughts on the story in the comments below and subscribe to Sci-Fi Traveler for more stories. See you in the next adventure. Goodbye.